The 71st Regiment of Foot was a Highland regiment in the British Army, which in 1881 became the 1st Battalion, Highland Light Infantry. History. First formation. An earlier 71st Regiment of Foot was formed in 1758 from the 2nd Battalion, 32nd Regiment of Foot. Soon after formation, the 71st Foot was part of a raid on the French coast at Cherbourg during the 7 Years' War. After taking the fort and destroying the docks, the regiment reboarded and returned to England before it took part in a similar raid on Belle Isle in 1761. In 1763 the 71st became a regiment of invalids before disbanding in 1768. Phrases Highlanders. Main Article 78th Phrases Highlanders. Main Article 71st Regiment of Foot. Phrases Highlanders. Phrases Highlanders were formed from independent Highland companies in 1757 before becoming the 78th Regiment of Foot in 1758. Later on that year, the phrases Highlanders were shipped to Nova Scotia, from where they took part in the French and Indian War. They fought at the battles of Louisbourg, Quebec and Ste. Foy. In 1763 the 78th disbanded at Quebec, where most of its men transferred to the Royal Highland Emigrants. After the outbreak of the American War of Independence in 1775, Simon Fraser, Master of Lovett, was authorized to raise the 71st Regiment of Foot, with companies mustered in Inverness and Stirling. 2 battalions were formed, and in April 1776 the 71st Highlanders, known informally as Phrases Highlanders, sailed from Glasgow as part of the reinforcement of British forces in America. Elements of both battalions, totaling about 400 men, were captured by rebel naval forces in actions both on the high seas and in Boston Harbor. However, most of the regiment arrived safely off New York in August 1776, and the remaining companies were brigaded into 3 provisional battalions for the campaigns 1776 and 1777. After the capture of Philadelphia, the 71st, having been reduced by sickness, was sent back to New York, where the regiment was joined by replacements from Scotland and resumed its original 2-battalion structure. In 1778, further companies were raised in Scotland, and later that year, the 71st was sent south to campaign in Georgia and the Carolinas. Although both battalions were again considerably reduced by sickness, a skeleton battalion structure was maintained. The 1st Battalion was effectively destroyed at Cowpens in January 1781, with many men being taken prisoner. The regiment was formed onto a single battalion, which went into captivity after Cornwallis's surrender at Yorktown in October 1781. The 71st Regiment of Foot, or Phrases Highlanders, served in both the northern and southern campaigns, participating in these major battles: Brooklyn, Brandywine, Savannah, Briar Creek, Siege of Savannah, Siege of Charleston, Camden, Cowpens, Guilford Courthouse, and Yorktown. In April 1782 the remaining battalions of the 71st Regiment were reformed into 2 distinct regiments, the 71st and the 2nd 71st. The first of these 2 new units consisted of the remaining men of the original regiment, who had not been killed in action or captured, and numbered only 189 when it set sail from Charleston with the evacuation of all British forces in December 1782. The 2nd 71st was disbanded in 1783, and the 71st Regiment was disbanded in 1786. MacLeod's Highlanders. The MacLeod's Highlanders were raised from an independent Highland regiment by John Mackenzie, Lord MacLeod, son of the Earl of Cromarty, In 1777 as the 73rd Regiment of Foot, Lord MacLeod was the first commander of the regiment, adopting the MacLeod of Harris tartan that was originally a Mackenzie tartan. The 1st Battalion served in the East India Campaign. Between 1778 and 1786 the 1st, 73rd Highlanders saw service in Gambia in West Africa and in the Mysore War in India, where the battalion was completely destroyed during the Battle of Conjeveram on 10 September 1780. A 2nd Battalion was raised in 1778, serving from 1780 in Gibraltar, where they took part in the Great Siege of the fortress before disbanding in 1786 after they were absorbed into the 1st Battalion in 1783 under Colonel George Mackenzie. In 1786 the regiment was redesignated as the 71st Regiment of Foot, 71st Highlanders. After redesignation, the 71st Highlanders carried on fighting in India, where they fought in the Battle of Pondicherry in 1793 and at Ceylon in 1795. In 1798, after a number of years on active service, the effective troops left in the regiment were transferred to the 74th Regiment of Foot and the remainder returned to Scotland. By 1802, a 2nd Battalion was formed in 1804. Over the next few years the regiment changed its name a number of times, before becoming the 71st in 1809 and finally 71st Regiment of Foot. In order to become light infantry, the regiment changed the way it trained, marched and fought. 1st, 71st Highlanders. The 1st Battalion left Britain for the Cape of Good Hope in 1806, where they were involved in minor actions. In June 1806, they were shipped to South America, where they were involved in the disastrous expedition against Buenos Aires by Sir Homepotham. The city was actually captured, but later the inhabitants rose against the small British force and took them prisoner. The 1st, 71st was one of the battalions captured. 2 battalion flags or regimental colours were also captured. On the 21st of April 1808 the regiment received new colours instead of those they had surrendered at Buenos Aires. The colours were presented by General Floyd, a veteran officer. After reforming the battalion they sailed in 1808 for Portugal, where they took part in General Moore's advance into Spain and disastrous retreat out of Spain, which ended with Moore's victory at Corunna. Upon leaving Spain the battalion was sent in 1809 on the Walcheren campaign. In 1810 the battalion was back in Iberia. They fought all the way through the Peninsular War. In the Battle of Vittoria they were to hold the extreme right of the line and were ambushed at the amphitheatre and massacred by 2 French regiments. 40 surrendered and around 200 were dead or wounded. Also were at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 as part of the 3rd Brigade in March, General Sir Henry Clinton's 2nd Division. The 1st, 71st lost 16 officers and 171 men killed and wounded at Waterloo. 2nd, 71st Highlanders. The 2nd Battalion was raised in 1804 and spent the whole of the Napoleonic War based in Scotland, functioning as a training battalion supplying replacement troops to the 1st Battalion. The 2nd, 71st was disbanded in 1815. 19th century. After Waterloo the usual tours of duty around the British Empire followed, serving in Canada, Bermuda, the West Indies and Corfu before the Crimean War broke out in 1854. The 71st Highlanders were at the Siege of Sevastopol from September 1854 and the Kerch expedition to eastern Crimea from May to June 1855. The 71st were sent to India in 1858, where they helped suppress the Sepoy rebellion in central India. By 1863 the regiment was based on the northwest frontier, where they fought in the Battle of Ambala. In 1870 1873 the regiment was stationed in Sri Lanka. Amalgamation. The 71st Highlanders moved back to Britain in 1865. They were stationed there when the Childers reforms were introduced in 1881, which saw the 71st paired with the 74th Regiment of Foot to form the 1st and 2nd Battalions, Highland Light Infantry. Battle honours. Battle honours awarded to the regiment were Hindustan, Cape of Good Hope 1806, Peninsular War, Rolica, Vimera, Corona, Fuentes Donna, Almaraz, Vittoria, Pyrenees, Nive, Orths, Peninsula, Napoleonic Wars, Waterloo, Crimean War, Sevastopol, Central India. Colonels. Colonels of the regiment were 71st Regiment of Foot 1758 to 1763, William Pettit, disbanded 1763. 71st Regiment of Foot 1775 to 1782, Lt. Gen. Hon. Simon Fraser of Lovett, 1782 to 1783, Gen. Alexander Lindsay, 6th Earl of Balcarres, disbanded 1786. 73rd Regiment of Foot 1777 to 1789, Marge Gen. John Mackenzie, Lord MacLeod. 71st Regiment of Foot 1789 to 1803, Gen. Hon. William Gordon of 5e, 1803 to 1809, Gen. R.T. Hon. Sir John Craddock, 1st Baron Howden, 71st Regiment of Foot 1809 to 1824, Gen. Francis Dundas, 71st Regiment of Foot 1824 to 1829, Gen. Sir Gordon Drummond, GCB, 1829 to 1838, Gen. Sir Colin Halkett, KCB, KCH, 1838 to 1841, Lt. Gen. Sir Samuel Ford Whittingham, KCB, KCH, 1841 to 1848, Lt. Gen. Sir Thomas Raynal, 6th Baronet, KCB, 1848 to 1849, Lt. Gen. Sir Thomas Arbuthnot, KCB, 1849 to 1857, Gen. Sir James MacDonnell, GCB, KCH, 1857 to 1863, Gen. Sir Thomas Erskine Napier, KCB, 1863 to 1870, Gen. Hon. Charles Grey, 1870 to 1874, Lt. Gen. Robert Law, KCB, 1874 to 1880, Gen. Hon. Sir George Cadogan, KCB, 1880 to 1881, Gen. John Hamilton Elphinstone Dalrymple, CB. Trivia. 71st High School in Fayetteville, North Carolina is named after the 71st Regiment because many of the Scottish settlers in western Cumberland County were the descendants.